You're a racist. Don't be a racist. We hear this all the time, but it seems like no one can even define what a racist is. Or better yet, what does it mean to be a racist? In my opinion, it's more than just being mean. It's more than just being judgmental. It means that you're lazy and incapable of self-sovereignty. To be racist means that you've given up on individuality. In other words, analyzing each person based on their actions rather than immutable characteristics. To be racist shows that you're too lazy to perceive people for who they are, and for your own comfort, you shove people into boxes that render the concept comprehensible to the finite capacity of your discerning intellect. The second you start allowing skin color or blood type to navigate your perspective of an entire group of people, you have subconsciously decided that individual responsibility is obsolete. Essentially, you allow your own ignorant autopilot to steer you past nuance, character, and the significance of free will in favor of your predictability and, dare I say, cowardice. As a Black conservative, many people expect me to be uncomfortable having a conversation about racism, but anyone who thinks that must not be familiar with me. And while I cannot emphasize enough how different the real world is from social media platforms like X, I think it's time to address the growing racial tension in the wake of Austin Metcalf's murder head on. The reality is that a lot of the animosity growing towards Black people, I get it. The statistics say a lot. I'm the first to acknowledge that the Black community is in a state of emergency. But the back and forth that I'm seeing makes me, a Black conservative, feel like a tragic mulatto. This conversation is going to require a lot of nuance because I'm going to be viewing this from multiple perspectives, so I hope you can as well. Hey cousins, welcome to Respectfully. So by now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the entire situation going on with Austin Metcalf. This tragedy has really shattered the hearts of people across the country, where this young 17-year-old track and football athlete was stabbed in the chest by a Black student named Carmelo Anthony. And while there's so many elements of this that make it tragic, I don't want to rehash too much of what's going on. I do have a recent video where I break down pretty much everything that's accessible to us at the time of filming this. But what's really, really concerning me is how many people are exploiting this situation as a means to attack Black people. And to give you guys an example of what I'm talking about, first, here's a tweet that I made that ended up going viral on Twitter, where essentially I talk about Black on various groups as crime. I talk about here how a lot of people say the narrative, if the roles were reversed and this was a white student attacking a Black student, how there would be so much outrage. And I get it. And I say here, for what it's worth, if the victim was a Black person, also a Black student, then there would be no outrage, because the formula when it comes to the media that we have figured out at this point, because we've been here before, is Black on white crime, it's internet noise. Black on Black crime, it's crickets. White on Black crime, board up your businesses, and Black on Asian crime, it's just a regular Thursday. It's unfortunate, and I get it. Again, I get why people are so frustrated. But I made a tweet like that, and the next reply I get, and mind you, this isn't just about one tweet. There are thousands of tweets repeating this sentiment about how it's not just a race problem, it's a problem race. But this is an aggressive, or one of the many responses I got. So here's one of the many tweets that I ended up getting in response to that viral tweet, where this person says, Black on Black is a good thing. Nice way to try and change the topic. Which I thought was very weird, but what this person means, especially if you go to their account and you see what these other accounts are saying that's replying to the tweet, the topic that they want to have is calling the Black race a problem race. These people want to talk about how Black people are all terrible, and they want to talk about Black youth, and they want to talk about this problem that we have within the Black community, which, again, as we'll unpack later, I get some of that sentiment, but it's really getting out of control. And then this was another response that I wanted to talk about. And first, actually, let me go back to that tweet. Black on Black is a good thing. So basically, the sentiment that Black people eliminating each other is a good thing. Come on, that's just heartless. But this other tweet, this shows the more aggressive type of response that I'm getting. This hard R face, it is 100% about race. Black people are evil. This would not even happen if a Black was not involved. Not just the stabbing, but the GoFundMe for them, soulless demons. N words, hard R, always do this. You denying that is enough. F you, N word. So when I say that this is not an irregular tweet, like I probably had hundreds, if not thousands of options just directly to me about this, calling me all out of my name, attacking me as if I'm responsible, as if I'm a part of this culture. I don't know Carmelo Anthony. I don't know anybody from where he's from. I don't go to any of the places that he is from. My upbringing has nothing to do with anything that we just saw. Okay. So this attack on me simply because I'm acknowledging the truth, it's kind of sad. And this continuously has gone on for the last few days to a point where I finally am having to say something about it. And to clarify, it's not just about mean words. It's about the difficulty of maintaining a sense of self-respect as a Black conservative while seeing the rhetoric go so unchecked by so many prominent people on the right. And again, I understand there's a big difference between X and real life. I talk about a lot how so many of the people you see spewing hateful rhetoric, these are trolls in the basement, if not bots from China, which we're going to unpack that in a whole nother episode. But a lot of these people, they are just trolls. They are just bots. But the ones who are really saying this and meaning it, it's very alarming to me how widespread it is. And if you're fortunate enough to have an algorithm that doesn't show you this as often as I do, as I see it, consider yourself lucky. But my entire mentions tab is full of this right now. And it's against the betterment of everyone. Everybody that is having to see this, it is unfortunate. And it makes the right look so bad, even though I know this is a fringe side of the right. But this fringe side of the right, it's getting so loud that I'm afraid it's going to start infiltrating into the rest of the right. So I really want to just address all of this. All of it from every angle. And that first requires a little bit of backtracking, a little bit of history, and, looking at least how I got here, because I can only speak on this from my experience in the conservative movement. So when it comes to the movement that I joined, what was appealing about Black conservatism to me was the emphasis on the nuclear family. It was about accountability and eliminating victim mentality and having limited government. This was the Black conservative movement that I saw, or the conservative movement at large that I saw. And with the niche there of being Black and conservative, it was very, very appealing to me. For those unfamiliar with my background, used to be a liberal, used to be a progressive, whole 9 yards. And then I ended up being red-pilled in 2020. When I first got around the movement, I wanted to be around groups like Blexit. Shout out to Blexit, stands for Black Exit. They are partnered up with Turning Point USA, and they ultimately were doing all the work that I wish that BLM would. They were, bringing opportunities and bringing a sense of purpose, and they still are. They're bringing a sense of purpose to so many of the Black people in the hood that otherwise would have nothing else to do, but they're wanting to give back. But now this is a way that they're able to give back and to get people out of the victim mindset, helping people get the tools and the resources and the love for free enterprise and entrepreneurship and just the vision to get out of the hood. I love the work that Blexit is doing. And as a Black liberal who was learning that pretty much everything I was indoctrinated with was a lie, I was very attracted to the conservative movement and the Black conservative movement. And I understood from the beginning that it's unique as this racial subgenre within a broader political movement. Now, that being said, it's interesting when we think about this, the limited leverage of using the past to justify the state that Black people are in now. That was another thing that conservatives talked about a lot that was interesting to me, because Black liberals are always trying to blame things on slavery. Black liberals and liberals in general and leftists, they're always trying to use something that happened well over 100 years ago as an excuse of why the Black community is so doomed today. And that to me got really tired and it got really lazy. And it just got to this point where I'm realizing none of you have any respect for individuality or accountability. So traditionally, conservatives and the movement that I joined, conservatives always emphasize this level of not only accountability and individuality, but color blindness. And we would often mock, and a lot of us still do, mock the left for how much they try to use race as a determining factor of one's character. But anyone that pays close attention to the current discourse that's happening and the media space of conservatives, they are seeing that that is drastically changing. A lot of conservative commentators now are increasingly vocal about the anti-white bias, and that goes in many different directions, whether it's criminal prosecutions, whether it's sports, whether it's media representation, the job market, etc. There is this narrative basically how white people are the new oppressed class. And the thing is, I get it. I agree. I've been saying for a while that white people are borderline at the point where they need their own civil rights movement. Because when it comes to racial discrimination, something that is literally outlawed in the Constitution, for some reason that doesn't apply to white people. And white people are, and Asians really too, Asians and white people are getting the short end of the stick when it comes to that. So I respect that there's pushback. I'm a part of the pushback because I am somebody who wants to see equality, period. Not equity. I want to see equality. And that involves not constantly trying to make a race feel like they're terrible people. So when it comes to all of this going on, and dare I say, the case for a racist, I get it. Kinda. I understand why it's frustrating. I would be extremely frustrated as a white person to constantly see the attack on white people that is going on in our society. But now things are going even further where people are not only condemning the Black community, or they're not only condemning this hatred towards white people, but they're condemning the Black community as a problem at large, as an entire race. And unfortunately, again, the Black community is building a case against itself. We're constantly seeing this play out. I'm obviously someone that's against the notion of judging all people based on skin color in either direction, but enough is enough when it comes to the chaos that is coming from the Black community. It's really disheartening when you look at the crime statistics, albeit a small percentage of the Black community that is committing violent crime and doing the chaotic things that are really destroying every major city, destroying our country, making people racist, giving people a reason to be racist. More and more, you're seeing these murder statistics. Black people are 13% of the population, learning that Black people, being only 13% of the population, are committing around 54% of the murders in America. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. Okay. I've made it very clear to so many people, 90% of the murders of people who look like me are murdered by other people who look like me. So I get it. When you talk about drug-related arrests, when you talk about theft, when you talk about just any sort of violent crime, for the most part, Black people are committing a disproportionate amount. But that being said, we have to remember that this is a small percentage within the Black community that is doing that is destroying the neighborhoods. But that small percentage, probably, 2% of the Black community or of the population, that's them creating the chaos. But still, why is there being such a case of Black people doing this? The Black community, we have to shift our culture. We have to be more hands-on with our kids. We need to stop allowing our kids to romanticize hood rattery, this ghetto culture, this ghetto aesthetic. And, somebody said this on X and it really bothered me. It's like, you can't just blame the culture because you see white kids listening to the same hood rap music, but they're not the ones more often than not living this out. Okay, so maybe because ultimately it is still a cultural thing, but it's not just the music. It's Black people and Black parents. We need to do, or I'm not a parent yet, child, but my kid would know better. Black parents need to do a better job of making sure that when the song ends, so does that energy. When the song ends, remember that it's make-believe. Learning to not feel the need to act out all the things that you're seeing in media. The things that you should be acting out is pursuing passion and pursuing your dreams and pursuing an education. Not to try to impress the local thugs in your neighborhood and going to rob people and thinking that's going to give you credibility. And, there's a lot of Black kids, and this is something I want to dive more into on another episode. But, when it comes to gang culture is really misunderstood. A lot of these kids will join gangs because they don't trust the police. So that's their way of wanting to keep their neighborhood safe. Well, I wish more of these Black kids understood that a way to keep your neighborhood safe and to keep your community and your people protected, go join law enforcement. Go join the force, because there is nothing that these major police departments love more than a kid from the hood who wants to join the force. you will see police officers bending over backwards to try to convince some of these kids from troubled homes to join the force because they understand the mindset and they have respect in the community. That is a way that you can protect your neighborhood. But instead, we're seeing this constant cycle of chaos from Black youth. And I hate to say it, because there's this narrative that being a Black conservative means that you hate yourself and you hate being Black. I love being Black. I'm so pro-Black. Shout out to Black women. Shout out to Black men. Shout out to Black history. I love the history. I love the story of triumph and what we did as a community to overcome adversity. We didn't sit there and allow ourselves to be broken. We built, we fought, we did what we had to do, and Black people continue to be just the pinnacle of creativity and innovation in so many ways. But we're not showing that the way that we used to. I'm proud of what Black people have done. I want to be proud of what Black people are doing. And right now, it's hard to feel that way when I see these statistics. Then I saw this tweet from Matt Walsh that I thought was really interesting. And this has caused quite a stir. You know, I've had a number of people reach out to me to ask how I feel about this. You know, I ain't got my eyes on, so to read this better, I'm going to pull this up on my phone. Don't mind me, Joe. Matt Walsh said, if I told you that a young man stabbed another young man, and this is referring to Austin Metcalf and Carmelo Anthony's situation. If I told you that a young man stabbed another young man to death for telling him that he was in the wrong seat, and then I told you that one young man in this altercation was white and the other was Black, and then I asked you to guess the race of the assailant, every single person would know the answer immediately. Young Black males are violent to a wildly outrageous, disproportionate degree. That's just a fact. We all know it. And it's time that we speak honestly about it, and nothing will ever change. That tweet made me so unbelievably mad because it's true. It's true. It's true. And I get what Matt Walsh is saying. You know, that's Matt Walsh's style. He holds no punches. He says it how it is. He's straightforward with it. But unfortunately, his followers can't understand the nuance of what he's saying. I don't take Matt Walsh's tweet as a call to action to attack all Black people or to demonize all Black people. But what some of his followers are now saying, and what I'm seeing is the common discourse on X, that's what they are saying. The common discourse on X, the amount of people calling me all types of N-words now because of this situation, and because I tried to add nuance to the conversation while condemning Carmelo Anthony, people are saying that just because I even added nuance and added, you know, literal factual details to the conversation, people are now calling me all kinds of N-words and saying that I'm the problem. And I'm not the only Black person dealing with this in the conservative movement. So one other thing I thought was interesting was Kim Klacik. Shout out to my girl, Kim Klacik. She had this to say to Matt Walsh. She added into the conversation, I can agree with this take. I have another. Female teachers sleeping with their minor students all have two things in common. They are white and from the suburbs. We should be able to discuss this honestly as well. People were mad. But statistically speaking, and, you know, even Bryson Gray, if you know him, Bryson Gray is very aggressive in his takes sometimes, but even Bryson Gray was getting fed up with the amount of constant slamming on Black people when you can play that same game with white people. When it comes to, you know, PDF files, so when it comes to, you know, human trafficking, and it comes to a lot of the, you know, sexual abuse on minors. I think you can say that. You know, it's YouTube. Don't want to get demonetized. That's disproportionately a lot of white people. But what I'm never going to do is go around and pointing the finger at white people and say, hey, you're a white teacher from the suburbs. Are you out, you know, trying to get at these kids? I would never do that. And Kim Klacik wouldn't either. So Kim Klacik, what she was doing was in a clever way of, you know, adding to the discussion. Let's not play that game. Let's not play this game of, yes, there's a disproportionate amount of this problem coming from one race, so we're going to blame everyone in that race with that issue. Okay? We should be able to address these disproportionalities with a fair conversation, but it shouldn't be used as a catch-all. Okay? That's what Kim was saying. And that's why I love Kim Klacik, because she did it in such a subtle way. But we have to learn how to have these conversations in a more concise manner, because otherwise it's just this lazy level of racism. It's lazy. If you feel the need to group every group together, or if you feel the need to group an entire massive group together because of their skin color or their blood type, then you are just lazy. To be racist means that you are giving up on individuality. It means that you are giving up on accessing each person and analyzing each person for their actions. It means that you have chosen to be comfortable putting people into boxes because that is your way to navigate through life. And there's a reason why I feel like a lot of racist people, they don't go very far. It's because their brain has a limitation. Their brain truly thinks in the box. And if you don't fit in the box, they're going to try to force you to fit into that box. And that's how you see this destructive cycle happening. It's a fact, there's obviously other factors in it, such as the Industrial Revolution. But when slavery was abolished, our economy it started thriving. Why? Because, obviously, again, the Industrial Revolution, but I also would like to believe that the mindset of people taking these shackles of racism off allowed them to be more creative. It allowed them to start to learn again. It allowed them to start to think, didn't view it this way, didn't view the Black experience this way, didn't view the experience of my own field this way. When people started not having to depend on the crutch of racism and the crutch of slavery, it made them start thinking out of the box, and people started getting to work when it came to innovation. So today, when you look at that from a modern context, I really do feel like you're just making yourself mentally handicapped by being a racist. It is a disease. Now, with this ongoing problem that we have of the condemnation going too far, I want to, again, talk about something that I've mentioned multiple times throughout this show, just the conversation of DEI being overexposed. I'm as anti-DEI as it gets. I think DEI is one of the things that's destroying our country. It's truly something that's corny. It's truly something that's outdated. It's something that is making the bar lower for everyone and everything. But if you are at the point where anytime you see a successful Black person, you think this must be DEI, then you might just be racist. And I understand when you see the narratives online, you see the conversations happening online, you see all of this, it's very easy to put people into the box and to follow this pattern on autopilot and try to say that all these different people are DEI hires. Speaking of autopilot, if you are one of those people that gets nervous when you see a Black pilot flying your plane, baby, that's racism. Okay? Of all the planes crashing in recent history here in America, how many of those pilots were Black? None. So the narrative of saying, this pilot doesn't have the credentials, you are out of your mind. Black pilots are not the ones crashing these planes. Okay? And if you talk about getting a Black lawyer, you cannot be a DEI lawyer. You cannot be a DEI doctor. You have the credentials to be there at that point. DEI does not pass the bar. While getting into college might be easier for people of color, because we've talked about that, objectively, factually speaking, but passing the bar has nothing to do with your race. Okay, when you're going through your medical clinicals, that has nothing to do with your race. They're not going to make it easier for you to become a doctor because you're Black. You might get into the program easier. There's an argument to be made there. But when it comes to actually getting the credentials, to getting that certificate to allow you to practice your practice, you are not going to have a career with any longevity. I'll put it that way. If you got there slightly easier because of your race. But once you get those certain credentials, calling someone a DEI hire is just disrespectful and racist. It's one of those concepts that has gotten overexposed. So this rhetoric, part of why this rhetoric is dangerous too, is because this racist rhetoric is being used constantly, and it is simply pushing Black people away from the right. And while some of you might not care about that, need I remind you that one of the biggest conversations that happened in the 2024 election cycle was how many Black men were coming over to President Trump. Okay. You look at a booming organization like Blexit or the Black Conservative Federation or all these different groups that have to do with conservative Black people escaping and fleeing the left and, supporting supporting conservative values and being a part of this huge conservative movement. That's amazing. The more the merrier there. Okay. And what you have to realize too is how consequential it is to push Black people over to the right. Because if more Black people, or sorry, pushing Black people over to the left, because if more Black people come over to the right, you realize just a 10% drop in Black support, and the left can never win a major election again for the most part. The Black vote is very consequential. And Black influence is very, very deep and impactful when it comes to every element of our culture, objectively. But now we have all these Black people coming over to the right, and what they're seeing is so much of the racism that we spent years swearing was not over here. That is humiliating as a Black conservative. That should be humiliating as a conservative, period. And again, I want to emphasize, because I know how some people are going to take what I'm saying and take it to the extreme, but I know that this is the fringe right that I'm talking about. I know that this is not majority of the people on the right. Otherwise, maybe I want to be here. Okay? Majority of the people that you talk about who are conservatives are on the right. They know good and well that this racist stuff that's happening is out of control and would never stand by it. But I need more people to stand up and say something that are influential in the right-wing space. Because it is getting out of control how much hate there is to Black people at large coming out of the woodworks on X. And a lot of them are bots. A lot of them are fringe. But there's still so many of them that it's drowning out the voices of those that are sane. And there's a lot of Black conservatives that are talking about this. Pretty much every that's a reach. A lot of Black conservatives, I'll just put it that way. Like more than 10 of prominent Black conservative influencers and people in the political space have reached out to me in the last week being like, is anybody going to say anything about this? And unfortunately, there's a lot of Black conservatives who are either entertaining it or pushing it along or just jumping as a part of the camaraderie because we love being a part of the conservative movement. The conservative movement is fun. Everybody's talking about how hot MAGA culture is now, how hot it is to be conservative, how cool it is to be on the right. We love it here. Overall, this is a great experience. It's a lot of fun to be Black and conservative these days. So that being said, a lot of people don't want to be kicked out of the clique. And a lot of people are afraid that they're going to sound woke for having a conversation like this. I can already guarantee the comments are going to be filled with people trying to say that I sound woke. I'm not being woke. I'm being objective. And I'm hoping, and I beseech you to try to view this conversation from a different perspective if you don't understand what I'm saying. And I want you to join the conversation. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm just letting you know how so many Black conservative and prominent Black conservatives feel about the conversations that are happening right now. And I do not want to see this split where all the Black conservatives are no longer going to be a part of the movement because we feel like we're being pushed out. And while we're always being called Uncle Toms, really, we should be referred to as the tragic mulatto. So if you're unfamiliar what I'm referencing when I say tragic mulatto, so the tragic mulatto is a fictional character type that was frequently used in the 19th and 20th century in literature or in early film, starting back in 1837. And a lot of you know what blackface is. Well, the tragic mulatto essentially was cosplaying. You had these people who the slave master would sleep with a slave, and now you have this half black, half white. That's essentially what mulatto means. This half black, half white character that is doomed and can't fit in anywhere and is stuck in between two places that they want to be accepted in, and they never make it. The tragic mulatto character is emphasized with their personal feelings, their self-hatred, their depression, leads to alcoholism, sexual perversion, and a lot of the time self-harm. Typically in literature, it was characterized with a lot of self-harm when you were the tragic mulatto. And if you don't know, I feel like most people know by now that the Uncle Tom rhetoric is so ironic. Because the Uncle Tom in the book, Uncle Tom is actually the hero in the story. And Uncle Tom is actually the person that goes back and sacrifices so much of their own freedom and all of that to protect their fellow slaves. So instead of calling us Uncle Toms, Black liberals should be calling us the tragic mulatto, because what it sometimes feels like is we are stuck in between these two worlds that we have intersectionalities in, but aren't fully accepted into both, it feels like these days. You have the black liberals who are so quick to call us sellouts and coons and, shoving us to the side because we don't worship progressive politics. And Lord knows the white liberals gas them up to continue to push us out. And then you have the conservative movement, which overall, more often than not, is extremely accepting. But you have this anti-black far fringe right that is growing in popularity right now, and growing particularly in comfortability when it comes to constantly attacking black people. And their influence, I'm scared of. Right now, I feel like a lot of these people are just stuck in the basement, but these people are starting to be out and about. These people are starting to really make a name for themselves when it comes to just their pushing their racist rhetoric. And they even go as far as, constantly hating on MLK, constantly hating on the civil rights movement. And I understand the flaws of both. I've actually called out multiple times, MLK was a mess of a person behind the scenes. And I'm sure he did a lot of low down, dirty things. I've read quite a bit about MLK. And, he's not somebody that I view in the personal sense as a hero anymore. Just after learning some of the allegations against him and the things that he was okay with and pushed for and promoted behind the scenes. But that being said, I can't sit here and act like I don't benefit from the work that he did publicly, how hard he fought for his dream and for black and white students and people to be able to coexist. And it's unfortunate now to see so many black liberals try to destroy MLK's dream and push for segregation. And again, a case for the people who are saying to bring back segregation on the conservative side. Well, there's a lot of white people who argue, well, black people are constantly saying that we need our own spaces, we need our own graduations, we need our own libraries, etc. And white people are like, you know what, you want your own, let's have our own. White people are saying, if unfortunate reality, if black people and white people were in their own spaces, white people will probably see less crime. I hate to say it. And you could argue maybe black people would too. I don't know. But I don't want us to get so comfortable with that narrative that we start using that as a crutch. Charlie Kirk has this video. Charlie Kirk, one of the most influential people in the history of conservative politics. This is a clip that he had to say.
We note in our piece that Kirk describes King as, quote, a bad guy. It's true. And Kirk's self-described very, very radical view that the country made a mistake when it passed the Civil Rights Act. Also true. As we note in the piece, Kirk has previously described Kirk as a hero and a civil rights icon. It's true. I used to be wrong. What inspired Kirk to shift his view on MLK? Why does Kirk think that MLK is a bad guy? When Kirk says that MLK says, quote, one good thing he didn't believe, what does he mean by that? Why does Kirk believe passing the Civil Rights Act was a mistake? Now, again, apparently they don't listen to the show because we do that at least once a week, right? Once a week we talk about why the Civil Rights Act was a mistake.
And if you want to hear his explanation on it, go watch the show. But the gist of it is they blame a lot of the issues that we see today on the civil rights movement. And I'm not calling Charlie Kirk racist. I love Charlie Kirk. I've collabed with him. I've looked up to him. I do look up to him. But I want to talk about the danger of that rhetoric and why I feel like that rhetoric is too extreme. And I'm not saying that, he's making this horrible call to action. Don't make this something more than it needs to be. Even within the conservative space, as you've seen in this episode, we're allowed to add nuance and push back. Okay. So don't think I'm coming for Charlie Kirk. With all due respect, respectfully, I don't think he could be any more wrong when it comes to, or actually, it's not even that he's wrong. I think he's taking that narrative too far. Yes, you can, technically speaking, trace a lot of DEI, CRT, all of that to the civil rights movement. But what we're not going to do is act like DEI today means the same thing as DEI during the civil rights movement. Literally, there was no diversity back then. Literally, things were not equitable or equal back then. And inclusion was not happening. We were segregated. So fighting for DEI in the 50s and early 60s versus fighting for DEI now, those are two completely different conversations. And I understand that, like, with affirmative action and welfare, all these different things that came grouped in with the civil rights movement, I'm one of the first people too that will criticize a lot of it. A lot of it in retrospect, ended up leading to the demise of our society. Okay, a lot of it was wrong, and a lot of it, especially from the likes of Lyndon B. Johnson from the Democrat Party, a lot of that was intentional to destroy our society and intentional to cause chaos. Because if there's anything we have learned in the last couple decades, if the issue and if the problem is profitable, they are in no rush to fix it. So when it comes to these more progressive policies that ended up coming around the civil rights movement, I understand the criticism of that. But to say that all of the civil rights movement was a terrible thing, insane. That is insane. That is the comfortability that takes as a white person to say that. That's scary to me. And that's scary rhetoric to me. And I know that sounds woke. Even as I say it, it sounds gross. But can we be so honest? Can we be so for real? This is why it's hard sometimes being in the modern conservative eco space as a Black conservative. And this is just me speaking my opinion. This is just me speaking my mind. I hope you guys understand what I'm getting at. Okay? Because as a Black conservative, you know, a lot of leftists, or if anybody that's a leftist or a liberal that's going to watch this, they're going to be like, oh, so here you are admitting that racism is real. Here's the thing about Black conservatives. We always, for the most part, have acknowledged that circumstantial and individualized racism can be real. We understand that there are large groups of racist people out there, and unfortunately, sometimes they're in positions of power. But more often than not, that's not the case. And there's a huge difference between systemic racism and circumstantial racism. Systemic racism means that systemically, we are not able to advance. It means that systemically, we are oppressed. If anything, we are systemically disempowered by the left and by progressive policies. There's a huge difference between the two. This country is not systemically racist. This country is not culturally racist, but there are racist individuals. And I'm able to acknowledge that nuance because I'm not lazy. And being a racist is lazy, to try to group people into this massive category and to typecast everybody from a certain race, whether it's Black people to white or white people to Black or anything in between or around. That is lazy. And you're sacrificing your self-sovereignty by being an autopilot when it comes to analyzing different people. So when it comes to the Black conservative movement and what it's going to take for us to survive and what it's going to take for us to not feel like this tragic mulatto, what it's come down to and what my conclusion is that we cannot spend too much energy hyperfixating on the progressive left who systemically disempower us, nor can we hyperfixate on the fringe right who are creating a bad name for all conservatives. And I know it's ironic hearing me say that. We shouldn't hyperfixate on it, but that's why we had the conversation today. And I hope this was as productive of a conversation as I planned for it to be, and as I truly, in the bottom of my heart, want this to be, because I don't want to see racial tension rise, because our country is healing. Our country is in a very transformative time period right now, and I want to see all of us be in cohesion and, you know, be happy and in harmony as much as possible. Hopefully I'm not being too optimistic, but I do want to see us back on the path that I feel like we were doing such a good job of being on leading up to the election. I don't want to see the fringe right become so loud and so unchecked that we end up taking 20 steps backwards. And to finish out this episode, I want to quote an article that inspired a lot of this, because I've been thinking about this conversation for a while. But I saw this article from The Blaze. The author's name, or the writer's name, is Delano Squires. And the article is called "Black Conservatives Are the Tragic Mulattoes of American Politics." And he says, the most valuable contribution Black conservatives can make today is to leverage our cultural competency, experience, relationships, and expertise to build institutions that can radically improve social and economic outcomes in the cities and communities they care about most. And I could not agree with that more. Please let me know what you guys think of this. I'm open to hearing every single one of your opinions. I'm going to be responding to a lot of comments because I think this is a discourse that needs to continue. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for tuning in.